Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I pride myself on being a cautious and courteous driver. I always obey speed limits, never text while driving, and try to be aware of pedestrians and other cars around me. So the last thing I expected was to get blindsided by an enraged Karen on my morning commute. It started out like any other day. I hopped in my reliable old Civic and headed to work. The roads weren't too crowded yet as I drove through our sleepy neighborhood. Up ahead, I noticed a woman struggling to parallel park her massive SUV between two small sedans. Even from a distance, I could tell she was getting frustrated as she jerked her wheel back and forth. I slowed down to give her space, staying well behind her bulky vehicle. The last thing I wanted was her backing into me if she made a sudden move. I figured she'd sort it out and I'd be on my way. But after 5 minutes of attempts, it was clear she had no idea how to maneuver that urban tank. Finally, she made progress, wedging it into the tight spot. But as she pulled forward to straighten out, there was an awful crunching noise. She had completely misjudged the distance and rammed right into the small sedan in front of her. The woman climbed out of her SUV, observed the damage with an annoyed look, then simply got back in her car and pulled away into a driveway a few houses down. At that point, I was in utter disbelief. She had just smashed into another car and drove off like it was nothing. I pulled over and walked up to the now wrecked sedan. The front bumper was basically torn off, dangling half into the street. I jotted down the license plate and details to report the hit and run later. As I turned to leave, the SUV lady came marching up the sidewalk towards me. "What do you think you're doing?" she yelled. "That's my car, not yours." I tried to explain calmly that I was just getting the plate number so she couldn't flee the scene. Well, that really set her off. "How dare you!" she shrieked. "I don't have time for this. I have places to be." She tried to brush past me to examine her own SUV, but I stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, you can't just drive off after smashing into someone's car. That's illegal." Suddenly, she got right in my face and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Get out of my way!" I stood my ground, insisting she wait for the police and exchange information with the owner of the other vehicle. But apparently asking a Karen to take responsibility is a big mistake. In a rage, she shoved me hard, making me stumble backwards. Before I knew what was happening, she was stomping over to my car. I yelled for her to stop, but she wasn't listening. The maniacal woman took out a key and scratched it all along the driver's side door, leaving huge, jagged marks in the paint. Then she grabbed a fist-sized rock from nearby and hurled it at the windshield with shocking force. Glass rained down as a gaping hole splintered across my field of vision. She hucked the rock again and again, spiderwebbing cracks over the entire pane. I was dumbfounded. This complete stranger was demolishing my car right in front of me. "Stop! What are you doing?" I pleaded helplessly. But she was past listening. In a final act of destruction, she drew back her leg and kicked in my side mirror, sending plastic shards flying. Breathing heavily, she fixed me with a smug stare. "There, now your piece of crap car matches that piece of crap." She gestured at the now trash sedan she had originally hit. I was at a total loss for words. Before I could even process this insanity, she started storming off down the street. "My car better be towed and fixed by the time I get back," she called over her shoulder. "It's a limited edition custom paint job." Part of me wanted to run after her, but my demolished car took priority. As the reality of the situation sank in, anger flooded through me. I took photos of the extensive damage from all angles. Then I immediately called the police to report her hit and run along with the unprovoked destruction of my property. An officer arrived quickly and I gave my statement, including the woman's license plate number. Another patrol car was sent to look for her nearby. About 15 minutes later, I watched in stunned satisfaction as the officer escorted the deranged Karen back in cuffs. She was screeching about police brutality and threatening to sue, oblivious to the fact she was the criminal. When the cop informed her she was being arrested for hit and run, property damage, assault, and reckless endangerment, you could see the entitlement drain from her face. For once, she was speechless, gaping in disbelief. As the officer put her in the squad car, she turned to me with contempt. "I'm not paying for any of this," she growled. "It was your fault for getting in my way. I have connections and will make sure you rot in jail instead of me." She banged her head against the window dramatically, playing victim even as she was carted off. I had to laugh. With the evidence and witness statements against her, there was zero chance her threats would matter. She was the one who attacked an innocent person's vehicle in broad daylight. Over the next few weeks, I fought her lies and false accusations with the truth. The cops and courts saw right through her attempts to pin the blame on me. In the end, she was convicted on all counts, sentenced to probation, community service, anger management classes, and restitution for the damage. The entire experience was completely ridiculous. Sometimes you encounter people like that Karen, whose entitlement eclipses basic sanity. She destroyed a stranger's car in a rage, then demanded her vehicle be repaired. I'm just grateful I got justice in the end and also that I have comprehensive insurance. But from that day on, I am much more wary of deranged drivers on the road. You truly never know when a Karen will strike next. The next one is a pro-revenge story. The setting. I worked in a moving company for a year before being laid off, along with half the crew as I was told. And during that time, I would learn just how, I wouldn't say pompous, more like bossy, some clients tend to be. Military types fit this requirement most definitely, and understandably, some ways, insufferable in others. The story, a client, call him entitled, wanted his stuff moved from a decent place in San Diego to a spot in the downtown area. A really nice apartment he picked out too. Now, the policy the company had was that he pays for 2 hours worth of work when he books a move, to somewhat guarantee some amount of income. And after those 2 hours, we charge him the hourly rate. As myself and 2 other guys are busying ourselves with wrapping all the furniture, loading up the cardboard moving boxes, and hauling up all the stuff and into the truck, I overheard Entitled talking to his wife saying something like, "I'll only pay them for 2 hours for the move total. No big deal, sweetie." No big deal, I say to myself, and I take the time afterward to let the guys know it's most likely one of the 2-hour jobs. Nothing we haven't done before. But hey, mild annoyances at best. An hour passes and everything is loaded up in time. I write down the times, start the truck, and off we go. We don't charge them for the transportation of the move, but when we reach the destination and we find parking, Entitled seems to be unnerved. Here's why. The apartment unit is 7 stories high, overlooking much of the downtown area, near Petco Park Stadium. However, that's not the case, it was the elevators. And said elevators are currently in use by the other tenants. With 45 minutes of the 2-hour job left to go, as I already told the boys to start unloading since we figured out already how to work with this. Again, I overhear Entitled say something under his breath, something along the lines of, "How come they didn't reserve the elevators, damn it?" I'm not sure if it was towards me or the apartment tenant, but given that he's had that kind of attitude since we started, I was suspicious that those words were aimed at me and the crew. So what does he do? Usually in this situation, most clients grumble and go along with it, but not Mr. Entitled. He starts shouting at us to hurry the heck up, while myself and 2 other coworkers are busting our behinds to unload the boxes and send them up the elevator. I'm tired, my lungs are burning from the strain of the job, my entire body is sweating pretty darn profusely, plus I got the client pacing back and forth looking like he's about to explode. Finally, Entitled snaps and starts an argument with me about the 2-hour mark past and how he's not paying for the rest of the move. Red-faced and screaming in my face. A-hole mode, X engaged. Formulating escape route, X in progress. Initially, I've tried to calm him down, and just when the other 2 guys reappear from the elevator, I tell them to stop. I look to Entitled and ask amidst the screaming if he wants to continue the move past the 2-hour mark. He says yes. I then ask to clarify that he will not be paying us for the remainder of the move past the 2-hour mark, as it'll render our services complete, and he says yes. I also ask if he's sure, as we will not move anything into the apartment once our services are complete. He gives me this "are you kidding me" face and says, "I paid you guys to move my stuff into my apartment." I hit back with, "Sir, you paid for 2 hours of our time," to which the man said, "I'm not going to pay you guys extra," and there it was, hook, line, and sinker. I radioed Central, let them know my times for the move, and also notified them of the completion of the contract. Once that was done, I gathered up the paperwork, had him fill it out, who then stormed off back up the elevator, most likely satisfied with his skill in negotiations. Once that was done, I told the boys to unload again, this time onto the street. But Scribe, why would you throw out this man's furniture onto the street? That's a pretty mean thing to do. Good question. I love these questions Reddit doesn't really ask, and here's why. Because now that he signed the papers releasing us from the contract, his things essentially are now his things, in our truck. There was nowhere else to put them except on the street. When he finally put 2 and 2 together, we had already unloaded the last of his things from the truck in about 15 minutes, which wasn't too bad. and another half hour and we would be done and over with. But sadly, that wasn't the case. After arranging Entitled's boxes and some furniture neatly and in an organized fashion, strapping the moving equipment down, and taking pictures of the back of the truck to prove we didn't take anything, I got onto the truck with my guys and drove off back to Central, where we drank all the water we could find, ate through our lunches and then some, and clocked out. The next one is a petty revenge story. I was a grocery checker in the 90S. One day around noon, I was working the 10 items or less, cash-only express line that was used by many people who were just grabbing a quick sandwich for lunch, so it was important to keep out people who had carts full of groceries. There was one other regular check stand open across from me that had one person being checked out with a large cart full. I didn't have anyone in my line at the time. Karen pulls up to the other check stand with a heaping cart and notices me standing there. She asks if I can check her out. I tell her no, I'm sorry, I have to be available for people grabbing lunch. Over the next 30 seconds, she just stared at me and then pulled her cart up to my check stand and started putting all of her things on my check stand and says, "You're not doing anything, you can check me out." So I was kind of stuck, so I tried to check her out as fast as I could and didn't say much. And wouldn't you know it, pretty soon I had a line of about 5 people standing there with their sandwiches and Cokes glaring at me. Remember, it was a cash lane. So as I am finishing her order, Karen takes out her checkbook and writes a check. Mind you, she didn't start writing it until I was about done. More delay. This was her big mistake. Her address was on the check. So, on my lunch break, I got the subscription cards from all the magazines and proceeded to subscribe her to just about every magazine we carried, and I always checked the 2 years bill me later option. I even signed her up for the Columbia Music Club, and I picked the very worst records. Weeks later, when she started getting all of the mags and bills for them, there is no way she would connect it to the checker she was rude to. I was probably one in a long string of cashiers she was rude to. Winner, me. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So I had a job at the same fast food restaurant off and on for a total of 5 years. And in these years, I've witnessed so many entitled parents of kids and malicious compliance stories that I can write a book about it. I will start with this one. Also, sorry for some bad grammar. Some backstory. I started my job the same moment the restaurant was set up, so in these years I got to know a lot about the company itself and knew most of the locations. I also knew that our restaurant was the northernmost restaurant in the country, and the province next to us, let's call it Province L, had no restaurant within the franchise. Not every employee knew this, but I did. I also knew that when we had new products that needed to get tested by the community, this would be at restaurants in the capital of the country, capital restaurants. And my province and Province L were nowhere near these restaurants. Because of my experience and bond I had with employees and customers, the managers knew that I did not need help with crazy customers, only when I called them. On to the story. There was a new vegetarian option tested only in the capital restaurants. Not every customer knew this, so when they asked for the product, I explained that we were not part of the test group. I always got a good response to this until this happened. On a not-so-busy night, a young Karen walked in and bolted for my cash register. The conversation went something like this. Me with a polite tone. "Welcome to name restaurant. How can I help you?" Karen. "I want your vegetarian option now." Me. "Sorry, miss, only the capital restaurants belong to the test group. Sadly, we don't serve this option yet." Karen screaming. "You are lying. I had it yesterday at Province L, and they told me it was served everywhere, so I want it. And since the customer is always right, you need to serve me what I ask for. And that's where I placed my trap card. We cashiers get yelled at a lot, but since I knew that she was lying, or mistaking us for another restaurant, and yelling, I decided to play along." Me. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was confused with another product. I haven't had the sandwich yet. Is it any good?" Karen. "I really liked it, and I'm happy that you finally have a vegan option for the sandwiches. We already had that." Me. "I see there is only one problem. You see, I know for a fact that Province L doesn't serve any of these sandwiches. Even better, none of our restaurants are in Province L." Karen's face became red, but not from shame. Oh no, from anger. Karen screaming, "Don't have that tone with me. I want to speak to your manager." So I called my manager. Trap card activated. You see, I knew that my manager was in the kitchen, out of sight from customers, and I knew that when Karen started screaming for the first time, my manager would listen in. Manager with a large grin. "What seems to be the problem?" Karen. "Your employee has an attitude. I want a discount." Me. Karen wanted to order the vegan option that she ordered at our restaurant in Province L. Manager grabbed his phone and showed Karen the list with all the restaurants in all the provinces, and what a surprise, Province L was not on there. Manager, you see, it might be the case that you mistaken us for another franchise. In that case, I would not do anything. But since you started to yell at my employee, I would ask you to get the hell out of my restaurant, or do you want me to call security? Karen's face was priceless. With both anger and convulsion, she stormed off. But not before I told her to have a nice day. The next one is an entitled people story. I call my stepdaughter's entitled boyfriend Wreck-It Ralph. No relation to the trademark cartoon, just coincidental naming. He has a tendency to break/ruin/tear up everything he touches. My stepdaughter, who is actually a sweet and endearing young woman whom I love dearly, has, like many young women with self-esteem issues, allowed herself to be led astray by WIR. In the year they've been together, she's lost everything, but at 23, she is old enough to learn her lessons without us parents coming to her rescue until she gets rid of WR and back on track. When they first got together, they lived with her dad and myself for a few months. It very quickly became apparent YR had a chip on his shoulder when it came to me. He would carry tales to my husband, causing us to argue, despite my husband telling WIR many times that was my house, and everything in it was mine. YR would keep asking my husband, not me, if he could have this or that, and that's if he asked. He kept getting more and more animals, despite our telling him no more. Neither were taking care of the ones they had. They weren't buying dog or cat food or cat litter, my husband and I were. They weren't picking up the messes, and they weren't training them, allowing them to tear up our belongings. Mary Jane is legal in our state, and there is a dispensary in our town, and the only work these two would do is door delivery. Her job with a daily payout. Just to get enough money for WIR to make a purchase at the dispensary every day, along with eating at fast food restaurant. YR's chip on his shoulder when it came to me was such that they brought my husband a soda one night, walking in the back door right past me, calling out loudly, "We got you your favorite soft drink," to my husband in the living room with zero inclusion to me. Another example is my stepdaughter asking if she could use my debit card to go get the four of us drinks at a local convenience store. One hot day, my husband and I were unloading stuff from the truck and trailer in the backyard, which was no problem. However, when checking my account, they spent $20 on food for WIR without asking. The end came when I told them they had to replace the bedroom door their dog chewed the bottom out of, and refused to allow the pit bull mix they wanted to rescue, even though it had a bite history, to enter my home. They moved to my stepdaughter's mother's home at that point. During their time there, my stepdaughter kept getting tickets in her car, which is only registered to my husband. They weren't paying their insurance, which I had bought my stepdaughter her own policy and paid the startup out of my money when they lived with us, and didn't pay the plate renewal. Now her license is suspended, and it cost my husband and I $600 to get the plates, again in his name only, unsuspended. Plus they had damaged the car and it needed repairs. So he took it from them. Before her license was suspended, but after the police took the plates from her car, my husband let her use his truck, which was on my insurance policy. YR drove it, and he has no license and blew the motor in it. It is now sitting and can't be used. I told my husband I would put the car on my insurance for him, but only if he drove it. If he returned it to them, I was canceling the insurance, which I've stood by. Nevertheless, WIR called daily demanding my husband return the car to them once it was legal and fixed. After 3 weeks, my husband finally said, "Look, you dumbass. I don't know what it is that you think you're trying to accomplish here, but you're not demanding anything from me, and you're not getting the car back. I may have originally bought it for her before she got with you, but it is my car in my name, and I'm keeping it in lieu of the truck you ruined. Don't call me again about the car. Got it?" We had been hearing of ongoing disputes between my husband's ex and WIR. Things got so bad there that YR told my husband's ex-wife to pack her crap and get the F out of her own home. Another time, he told her to shut the F up and remember who she's talking to. So we all decided it was time to let our daughter hit rock bottom, since she wasn't seeing how WIR had taken her from being a sweet, lovable, well-liked, and responsible girl in a college nursing program to this person with a criminal history and no prospects at the moment. My husband's ex-wife moved in with her boyfriend, turning the power off at the home she had been renting, and told her former landlord, whom she was actually longtime friends with, she wouldn't allow it to affect their friendship if he evicted them for squatting, since neither were on her lease to begin with. When my stepdaughter called wanting to come back, my husband told her she could, but WIR could not. Now they're staying at a homeless shelter in the town where WIR's mom lives, and WIR's mom won't let them live with her either. We hate to see her go through this, But this entitled WIR she won't let go of has really brought her down, and she can do so much better. This guy actually told us once he couldn't work at a factory that he interviewed at because it was climate controlled and his heart condition won't allow that. Then argued with me and my husband that climate controlled meant controlled by the climate, so it was hot in summer and cold in winter. We haven't seen him hold a job or do anything useful and productive since they've been together. Just demand from and use the people who love the girl he's become a Klingon to. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.